Let me tell you about my city. It's wild gritty.
And welcome into another episode of The Change-Up on WOAY Sports. I'm Matt Digby, joined as always by Tom Beal. It is November 3rd, 2016, and for the first time in 108 years, the Chicago Cubs are world champions. A day that Cubs fans certainly weren't sure if they would ever get to hear those words. A day that for us, Tom and I, as neutrals in this World Series, I'm not sure if we thought the Cubs would ever win a World Series, knowing the pain and the heartache of recent years, notably 13 years ago when we were both alive, the Cubs blowing a 3-1 series lead against the Marlins in the 2003 National League Championship Series. But it's finally come.
Man, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, some part of me didn't think it was ever going to happen, but at the same time, like, a team that's, I mean, they're, for the most part, they've been one of the better teams in baseball year in, year out. They always have one of the higher payrolls. So you had to figure at some point it was going to happen. And it's really awesome to see it finally come to fruition this year for those guys. I mean, they have such a good ball club. They were the best team in baseball all year long. They really deserved this one. It wasn't any kind of fluky World Series. Well, at least in the fact that they were the best team all year. I mean, they did have to come back from a 3-1 deficit, which was didn't seem likely at the time, but they got that win in Game 5 at Wrigley, pushed it back to Cleveland for Game 6, and stole those 2 games. And what a Game 7 we had, man. I mean, that was like the best way you could have possibly ended that series. Just 2 very good teams all year, and back and forth they went in Game 7. It was an outstanding game, outstanding series, and congratulations, Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, how often have we seen this, that a team does so well in the regular season, but for whatever reason, sometimes they're just caught on a bad night in the postseason, but they could never really put that success together and maintain a championship. I'd say really, at least in our lifetime, it's been roughly a 50-50 split. The team that has the better regular season record in the championship series generally goes on to win. You know, it kind of works out the way it should, but, you know, going back to what happened in the NBA, Golden State blowing a 3-1 lead in the finals against the Cavs.
We talked about it a lot on the show with baseball, specifically the sample size, and how when you condense that so much in a playoff series, it kind of increases the variance. And so things like that can definitely happen a lot in baseball, where a team like, I mean, the Indians weren't necessarily the best team in the American League all year, but come the playoffs, I mean, they were just playing such great baseball, and Terry Francona's ability to manage his bullpen in kind of non-traditional ways, you know, bringing Andrew Miller in for multiple innings and, you know, not necessarily using him in a defined role, like not using his guys like you're a 7th inning guy, you're an 8th inning guy, you're the closer. He would bring in Miller at the time when he needed the most, and he would pitch him for 2 innings if he had to. He would pitch him on multiple innings back-to-back nights. And we saw the Cubs kind of do the same thing here in this World Series, and it almost came back to haunt them a little bit. Aroldis Chapman, they used him a ton in those last 3 games. I mean, he threw, was it like 40-something pitches in Game 5, and you're like, okay, they're gonna give him a break in Game 6. They're gonna have to get it done without him. And then Game 6, when they have that 5-run lead and they brought him in, I was shocked, honestly. I didn't think, you know, why are they making him throw when they might need him for Game 7? I thought that was a very questionable move by Joe Maddon, and it kind of did come back to haunt them, because last night Chapman comes in, he blows that 3-run lead. All of a sudden, we get a tie ball game. We're going to extra innings. So that was a very costly mistake that, you know, almost came back to bite them. I mean, fortunately, they were able to get it done in extra innings. But it just goes to show, you know, anything can happen in these 7-game series. And fortunately for the Cubs, the team who was better all season long ended up getting the title at the end.
Yeah, one thing I brought with us today, Game 5 was on Sunday night. I didn't have anything else going on for me personally that night, so I was able to keep score of the entire game from start to finish, and because either way I was going to witness history. I was going to either witness the Indians winning the World Series or the Cubs winning a World Series game at Wrigley Field. But taking a look at Chapman's stats, he went 2 2/3 innings, and from what I saw from the telecasts, his longest outing in the regular season had been 2 1/3 innings. Ironically, that was against the Indians back in July, and now he comes in, pitches one more extra out against them, facing 10 batters with 4 strikeouts, only giving up 1 hit but no runs.
So he was called in to do what would have been his longest start, basically 3 nights in a row to close out that series. So
Absolutely.
I mean, even for a guy who can throw as fast as he does, I mean, that is a very taxing experience for someone like that. And, again, I don't understand why they did it in Game 6. And fortunately, they were able to come through in the extra innings. Otherwise, we'd probably be talking about that today is, what was Joe Maddon thinking back in Game 6, throwing Chapman when he really didn't need to. He really could have thrown anyone else out there. And even in Game 7 with the 3-run lead, you think maybe just save him until the 9th inning and they bring him in early like that, and it doesn't quite work out. But, it's good that they got it done. And like you alluded to there, kind of a no-lose situation for baseball as far as, either way, they're going to have one of the longest droughts in their league history snapped with the Indians or the Cubs winning that World Series. So great situation for them. I'm sure the ratings, when those numbers come out, will probably be much higher than the last several years of World Series. I think everybody in America, other than the state of Ohio, was rooting for Chicago to win that World Series. So just a good situation for baseball in general.
Absolutely. I'm sure Game 5 will definitely beat out the Sunday night football game.
I believe it did. Yeah.
Granted, Sunday night football game was actually quite entertaining. I did get to see the end of that, the Cowboys and I'm just blanking right now on who they were playing.
The Cowboys-Eagles, yeah.
Cowboys-Eagles.
Went to overtime.
Yeah, I remember that because the game-winning touchdown pass to Jason Witten. But staying on the topic, did it feel inevitable that this series was going to go 7 games just because of the combined streaks coming together, forming nearly 200 years of pain and torment?
You kind of had to, right? Because I mean, like the Cubs, just the way everything's gone for them, it's always been kind of like a movie. Going back to 2003 with the Bartman thing and how they seemed so destined to go to the World Series that year. It's like every way they do it has to be dramatic, and so it wouldn't have been. It just didn't seem right for them to just go out quietly in a 5-game series like that and kind of just, another loss for the Cubbies and they're going to have to toil in misery for another however many years. So, it kind of felt like this series was destined to go 7 games. And especially after they won Game 5 and brought it back to Cleveland, you could feel just that momentum swing and just kind of the attitudes amongst not only the players but the fan bases, okay, we're in this thing, we're not, this isn't over, we're going to keep fighting for it, and maybe just a little bit of panic on Cleveland's side, and it turned into a great series.
Yeah, absolutely, panic, and I think that partially is a big reason that kind of allowed the Cubs fans to buy so many tickets and be in attendance in Game 7. It really did feel for a time at Progressive Field last night that it was 50-50. Granted, it's because, they're selling Game 7 tickets right outside the ballpark right as Game 6 ends because you don't know if there's going to be a Game 7.
Yep.
But it was very neat to see so many Cubs fans in attendance, and it was not just 1 or 2 scattered around the ballpark. It was several healthy contingents.
Yeah, and that's one other cool thing about having the series kind of close to each other like that. And you can, that'll tend to happen a little bit more. But yeah, and seeing some of the celebrities in the crowd, Bill Murray, and we saw Vince Vaughn so much throughout this series, and just kind of cool to see the Cubby Nation. I mean, they're a group that, win or lose, they've always been there for their team. They always sell out that stadium at Wrigley, and they're always passionate about their team. They're one of the several teams in the league that travels really well. The Red Sox, Yankees, amongst the other teams that travel really well with their teams, and they're a passionate group, and they've stuck with their team throughout what has been a 108-year drought and no World Series appearance even since 1945, and still they stuck with their fan base, and they wrote it out, and now they're finally rewarded. So it's a glorious day in Chicago, I'm sure. I'm sure the streets
it's going to be a glorious several days in Chicago. Time we are taping this, they have still not decided on the time for the parade. They were hoping to get it in on Friday, but it's becoming increasingly clear that that probably is not going to be the case. They may have to plan ahead for Monday to have the parade, which I guess will only make it even better, allow more people to get make plans and be in attendance for what should be, it was already going to be historic, but I think we're going to see a party that's unlike any we've ever seen championship-wise.
Yeah, and let the players get a little bit of rest too. That's always the one thing I think about with these championship parades is the guys are flying, especially if they win on the road, they're flying all the way back home, and then they're doing, Today's Show or whatever early morning show and radio appearances, and they're doing all these different things. And then like a day later, they're hopping on the parade bus at like 7 in the morning and doing all day things. Like these guys don't get any chance to like just rest and soak it in a little bit before they get out there. So it'll be nice, give them a couple days rest and let them just kind of bask in the glory of this one, and then go back home and show the fans some love. And it'll be a tremendous experience. I went to the Red Sox parade when they won back in 2013, and that was just a really cool time to see the players, kind of say thanks to the city that's shown them support all year. And that's certainly what it'll be at Chicago. Probably record numbers, I would guess, for this parade.
MVP of this World Series was Ben Zobrist. He had the game-winning RBI in the 10th inning with that liner going past Jose Ramirez into left field, allowing the winning run to score. They would add on an insurance run, which did prove to be a critical run. As it turned out, the Indians would get a run back. But Zobrist is now a two-time World Series champion. He won last year with the Royals. Now this year, he not only wins with the Cubs, he is the World Series MVP. Right, Call?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, biggest hit and the biggest moment, I think you got to give it to him. So, I mean, also, great series by Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant. They had some pretty key hits throughout the series. But, yeah, I think in that type of situation, you got to give it to Ben Zobrist. And he's really become, like, just the ultimate utility player. And he's a guy who just, with everything he does as far as where he can play on the field and his defensive abilities, he just brings so much to a club that kind of goes unseen by traditional metrics. But we've seen it, and that's why I think he's been a part of so many winning teams, is because he makes teams that much better with kind of these more advanced sabermetric statistics. And he kind of brings that element to the table that you don't necessarily see every day. But he's a tremendous all-around baseball player, and he came up in a huge moment for the Cubs last night.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. I think anybody, with the exception of Jason Hayward on the Cubs roster, was worthy of the MVP. I mean, Hayward, he has just not had a good season, and yet
he's had a great defensive season.
He did have a great defensive season, but at the plate, he was just sure out every single time he came to the plate.
Not what they paid for.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if he was worth the money, if he could make it in the Cubs, and now he is a World Series champion. Of course, with the Indians, you could be saying the same thing about a guy like Lonnie Chisenhall, for example. But Hayward is a World Series champion. If the Indians had won, who would you have picked from their squad to be the MVP?
Well, I think it would have probably been Corey Kluber, but I mean a big part of why they didn't win the World Series is the same reason why you probably wouldn't give it to Corey Kluber, because he pitched so great in those first two games of the World Series. He pitched so outstanding really the whole entire postseason, and then just Game 7, it just all kind of unraveled for him. So, I mean, if he had come out in Game 7 and pitched like he had been pitching, the Indians probably win that game, and I think he's definitely your World Series MVP. But kind of just by virtue of pitching, so poorly in those first few innings, it kind of took the game out of Cleveland's hands. I mean, they did make a comeback effort later, but that kind of took it away from them, and took it away from what probably would have been his MVP to lose.
Absolutely, yeah. I would have personally gone with Rajai Davis, especially the resurgence he's had, especially in this World Series. A guy in his mid-30s who not having followed his career a ton, I didn't even realize he was in his mid-30s starting the World Series. But he went 2 for 4 in Game 5. He had a couple big hit. He had the big home run in Game 7. That's right, to tie the game. That was just a wild 8th inning, right as Chapman came in, too. My MVP vote probably would have gone to Davis had the Indians gone on to win. But again, Zobrist, the MVP, he's going to be, he is the rightful MVP in our eyes. And this lays the foundation for another great year in 2017 for both of these franchises. The Cubs and the Indians have a lot of young guys. You talk about Addison Russell, Javi Baez for Chicago, Francisco Lindor for the Indians, who did so well.
Well, keep in mind, too, that Carlos Carrasco and Danny Salazar didn't even play in this postseason for Cleveland because of injuries. Those are two great young starters that they have who will be back in the mix next year. And the Cubs, I mean, they're such a young core as well. You just mentioned some of their guys. Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant, still very young. So, I mean, they're only going to get better in the next years as well. So it'll be interesting. I don't know if, it's not like the NBA where you can almost kind of pencil in the Cavs and Warriors to meet up for a third straight year once again, because of baseball, can be so random, and there's so many things that can happen in this offseason that can change the course of other teams' trajectories. And so we'll see. I mean, they're definitely going to be back at the top of the mountain. I would guess that the Cubs would at least win their division again next year, because I mean they had a pretty clear edge over the Cardinals and the Pirates and some of those other teams. But I mean, a team like the Dodgers, the Nationals, maybe if they add another piece, those types of teams could challenge them for the NL Championship Series. On the other end of things, the Rangers will be right back there next year. The Red Sox will be in contention. Orioles, Blue Jays. So, kind of the AL is a little more wide open, I think. But I think the Indians are in a great spot, and they're a young team, so I would expect them to get better next year.
Absolutely, yeah. I think right now, if I had to pick, I would say the Indians and Red Sox would be my picks to make the ALCS, especially because they did have such a compelling division series. Indians taking close games for the most part.
Yeah.
But it just came down to, who was better on a given night, and that's what baseball is in general.
Yeah, and especially, when David Price pitches like David Price tends to pitch in the postseason for whatever reason, that'll happen to you. But, if they don't draw each other in the first round, I could definitely see that being an AL Championship Series.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations again to the Chicago Cubs. The 108-year curse is over, whatever you want to call it. Billy Goat curse, Bartman curse. I think the Billy Goat curse is more applicable because it's been around for longer. But
yeah, if you believe in those things, yeah.
Whatever it is, it's finally over, Cubs fans, and they have certainly waited a long time for their championship, and they deserve to celebrate indeed. And we're going to take a quick break. Coming up next on the Change Up, we're going to talk some local sports, college football, high school football. We are entering the home stretch of the regular season. High school football, actually, one more week left until the playoffs, and we'll get into that as the Change Up continues. You're listening to the Change Up on WOAY Sports. And welcome back into the Change Up on WOAY Sports. Matt Digby joined by Tom Beal, who joined us in February. He had to wait a couple months to experience the joy that is high school football in southern West Virginia. And we are now at the end of the regular season, week 11, the final week this Friday. And Tom, it's been a great regular season for high school football.
It has been, man. I think coming into this season, a lot of the talk was, maybe we'll have one or two teams that kind of stand out and have a chance to make a good postseason push. But I've been surprised. We've seen a number of teams that have looked really, really good. I mean, Fayetteville being at the head of the pack, but there's been some outstanding teams in this area this year. It's been really fun to cover them. James Monroe, Nicholas County, Independence. So just some good football across the area. You've got to see some really good games this season, and it's almost time for the playoffs. Absolutely,
and Fayetteville is where we'll start. We'll go up single A, double A, triple A. We start in Class Single A again. Fayetteville, the Pirates, 10-0. They capped off a perfect regular season with what was actually a come-from-behind win over Greenbrier West. The Cavaliers getting out to that early lead in the first quarter before the Pirates were able to respond, take the lead, and go on to win that game 53-18. And it was a season where the Pirates really were very convincing at all their wins. I think when you look at it, the only close games they had into the fourth quarter were on the road at Nicholas County, a double-A team that's in position for a playoff, and on the road against Buffalo, a team that at the time was in the top 10 in Class Single A and still is in control of their own destiny for a playoff spot themselves.
Yeah, and really impressive that they were able to get those two wins. Especially the Nicholas County one was the first one where I was like, okay, we've seen them kind of roll over these single A teams. Clearly they're one of the best in single A, but Nicholas County at that time, undefeated in double A. They had some really good wins. Their defense had just looked outstanding. So, that was one of the games where like, okay, well, I don't know, can they get it done against a team like Nicholas County? And they came out and we saw a fantastic game. That was maybe one of the best games we've seen all season long in high school football. So for them to get that win, then go into Buffalo a couple weeks later and pull out a victory there, just two really impressive victories that show that this is a team that can not only put up all kinds of points and blow a team out, but they can grind out, they can win the close games, they can face adversity and come through it on the top end of things. So it's been impressive to see them so far, and I think that they're poised for a deep playoff run.
I think so. Getting to see this team last year, they got off to a 3-0 start in 2015 as well. Then came their Week 4 matchup on the road at Meadowbridge, a very defensive battle to start, but the Wildcats were able to get the win that put the Wildcats back on track, got them back to 500. They were able to continue their run to the Class Single A playoffs, continue that playoff streak. But also for Fayetteville, Will Fenton had already had that injury. He was still recovering from it. It would still be a couple weeks before he returned, but it kind of put that uncomfortable taste in their mouth that they just never were able to get rid of the rest of the season, seeing as how they would finish 2015 3-7. This year, you don't have that issue with Will Fenton being out. Dalton Dempsey stays healthy. Jordan Dempsey stays healthy. Alex Hewitt and Davey Gilliam really emerged as wide receiver and defensive back. And how about Braden Broach, one of their offensive linemen and defensive linemen too? He had an interception return for a touchdown against Oak Hill, a fumble recovery return for a touchdown against Midland Trail. I mean, it's not just Will Fenton. It's a bunch of different guys for the Pirates.
Yeah, and with a size of only, I don't know, was it 23 guys in their entire program, for them to have so many star players, I mean, it's really, really impressive. I mean, most teams, they'll have 50 some odd guys and they'll have maybe 3, 4, 5 that stand out. I mean, Fayetteville has 5, 6 guys who are like really, really top-notch players. Would be top 2 or 3 players on almost any program, and they're all on that same team out of just a group of 23. It's really impressive. I mean, you mentioned Marcus Lively, another guy too, who's had a pretty good season for them, and Will Fenton being healthy, I think, has just made a world of difference for those guys. A quarterback who can really stand in the pocket and sling the ball downfield. He's tall, he's got a strong arm, and he's got a lot of weapons out there that he can hit, and some playmaking guys.
Yeah, and so Fayetteville, right now, they are ranked third in the state in Class Single A. We'll wait to see the final seedings and see where the Pirates end up and who they'll play, whether it's on the Friday, the 11th, or on Saturday, the 12th. Meanwhile, there we have another area team in Class Single A that right now controls its own destiny for playoff spots. Two teams actually, they're playing each other. So you have Summers County, which is ranked 9th in the state. They are tied with Williamstown. Bobcats have been more quietly putting together a good season, but still a good season nonetheless. The big question was going to be, how do you replace all-state talent like Matt Ryan, and Nathan Grimmett seems to be filling that role just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. He's had a great season, throwing the ball. Their offense, they get the job done. It's what they do. They can move the ball down the field, and they're not necessarily the most flashy team, but they've been consistent throughout the year, and they've done a really good job of putting themselves in a position to make the playoffs, and hopefully they can get a game or two won in that playoff series, but they've had a tremendous year.
Absolutely. The other area team right now with playoff aspirations is the Mount View Golden Knights, a team we admittedly do not cover a whole lot because they're so far away from Oak Hill, but the Golden Knights right now ranked 18th in the state. If they do win at Summers County this Friday, no doubt in my mind that will be enough to get them in the top 16 and get them in the playoffs. But we've gotten to see them once or twice against Pikeview. We'll get to see them against Summers County as well.
Yeah, and so that'll set up for a real good matchup on Friday night between those two teams. If sometimes it's the team that wants it more, not necessarily the better team. We saw that last week with Greenbrier East and Princeton. Princeton we thought had been the better team all season long. They should probably get the win, and Greenbrier East just came out and really gave it to them. So we'll see if Mount View can step up and do what they have to do to get in the playoffs.
Absolutely, and it's been a great season for our other single A teams. It hasn't always been the easiest of years for Midland Trail. I know they're still trying to, get back to what it used to be. That's been the motto for Frank Isaacs as he now completes his second full season. But the Patriots did close the season last weekend with a win against Valley. And the Patriots, I think, are in the right direction moving forward. They will have a lot of guys coming back, including guys like Thomas Ferris, Curtis Gray. They definitely have a lot to look forward to in 2017. And then also, I think the foundation has been set that going into next year, I think Greenbrier West, you can expect a lot more improvement from them, from the Cavaliers. It hasn't been an easy couple of seasons. Same for Valley, who will actually be hosting the Cavaliers this Saturday in the season finale for both teams. And also Meadowbridge. They are on the road this week at Gilmer County. The Titans right now very much in position to host a playoff game in Class Single A, so it's going to be a tough test for the Wildcats. It was always going to be a tough year for Meadowbridge. Replacing the all-time winningest head coach in high school football history in the state of West Virginia, Larry McClintock, and then trying to keep alive that streak of how many playoff appearances in a row.
Yeah, and I don't know if that pressure really got to them. It was clear kind of, even from just seeing them in the preseason, just going to see their practice, they were just a really, really small team. They lost the majority of your size, and when you're a single A team, you can kind of, that will rotate around really quickly on you, where you'll have these guys who, they come all the way up freshman to senior year. By the time they're senior year, they're outstanding players. They've gotten really big. They've been lifting and everything, and then they graduate, and sometimes that can leave kind of a void in your team. So they lost several big guys in the offensive line. They just not much size, and it's tough to compete when you don't have a lot of size, especially on the offensive line. So I think it was always going to be a challenge for them. Dwayne Reichert, I think he's tried really hard, but it can definitely be a big adjustment in your first year trying to get a team back on its feet. And so I think that maybe it was a little unrealistic to expect this team to make the playoffs again, but I think they've definitely learned some things, and hopefully going forward they'll get some new kids in the program and start, younger kids will start to get bigger, and they can start to get themselves back on the right track.
Absolutely. I think we can definitely expect another good season for the Wildcats in 2017 as they try to as they have an opportunity next year to start a new streak of playoff appearances in consecutive seasons. Moving on to Class AA now. Right now we have 3 teams, not just in the top 16, but in the top 8. So that means they'd be in position to host a first-round playoff game. You have James Monroe at 5th, Nicholas County at 7th, and Independence at 8th. All 3 of those schools are in action this Friday. James Monroe on the road. All 3 schools are on the road. James Monroe is at Riverview. Mavericks have done very well. They did not let that loss to Nicholas County get to them. They were able to rebound with a road win at Princeton, a road win at Liberty, 2 places that are not easy to get wins at, and they appear to be on the right track.
Yeah, and they've been a team that's been really impressive this year too, just by what they can do offensively. I mean, they've done a great job of running the ball with several different guys. I think Grant Moeller had a really big game last week. He's had a good season for them, and they didn't, like you said, didn't let that loss to Nicholas County get to them. They bounced right back, and they showed that they're one of the tougher teams in Class AA, and so they'll be right there come playoff time.
Absolutely. Nicholas County, meanwhile, they still have that one loss to Fayetteville that I think had they won that game, they certainly would be in contention for a top 4 or a top 3.
Yeah.
But at the same time, their defense has not been bothered by that, giving up 44 points to the Pirates after allowing only 9 points total the first 4 or 5 games of the season. Nicholas County is a team that's definitely going to be in the position to maybe win a couple games in the playoffs.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like they were going to give up any points this season. They finally did break the shutout streak against James Monroe. They only gave up 9 there, getting that win, and then Fayette County came in and kind of blew things open there. But they stuck with it. They have an outstanding defense, just a lot of big guys. They're physical. They move around quickly. They all gang tackle, which is so important, getting after guys on the ball. And then Tate Mays and Carter Siebert Sweeney have they make the offense run. Tate Mays, he does pretty much everything for them. He punts, he's quarterback, he plays defense, and he returns kicks too. So he does kind of it all for them, and just that connection, we see it almost every game. Just a long touchdown pass, Tate Mays to Carter Siebert Sweeney. It seems to happen almost every week, and it's interesting watching a lot of their games because you'll watch the first quarter and it'll be real defensive struggle and kind of neither team seems to be able to move the ball, and it's almost like Nicholas County, wears the other team's defense down. They run the ball, a lot in the first quarter and kind of just wear them down a little bit, and then they open things up and they go over the top to Carter Siebert Sweeney, and that's how they've scored a lot of points this season.
Absolutely. So James Monroe ranked 5th right now in the state in Class AA, Nicholas County 7th, and right behind the Grizzlies at 8 is Independence. The Patriots returning to the playoffs last year after a fairly lengthy playoff drought. They are right now in position to host a home game as they are ranked 8th, just ahead of Winfield at 9th. But the Patriots have also been a very strong team on both sides of the ball, and they've been able to get the job done with a lot of talent, especially in the run game, with guys like Noah Adams, Connor Gibson, and Marcus Guy.
Yeah, I mean, how happy are they to have Noah Adams finally come over from wrestling and play football for 1 year? He said, I just want to do it once before I graduate. He said he would have regretted it if he hadn't come back over and played football, because he played all those years growing up and then kind of focused more on wrestling. And that's kind of where his bread and butter is. He's going to get a scholarship out of that, we assume. So, nice to have Noah Adams back in the fold on the football team, because he's made a real difference in their running game and what he can do with the power run game inside and really open things up on the outside for guys like Connor Gibson and Marcus Guy. It's just they have a three-headed monster back there, and it makes them really tough to defend.
Yeah, the Patriots this week are at Roane County, a game I mentioned on the 5th quarter presented by Wendy's of Southern West Virginia, which is going to be an exciting game because you take a look at what happened last year entering Week 11. Roane County entered that week ranked 16th in AA. Independence was, I think, 17th or 18th. They were on the outside looking in. They needed to win against Fayetteville, which they were able to do, but then they needed Roane County to lose to Williamstown, which is exactly what happened, and that allowed Independence to get that 16 seed in Class Single A. Granted, the Patriots would lose in the first round to Bridgeport, but this year the tables are kind of reversed. Independence right now trying to secure a first-round home game. Roane County, I think, is 18th or 19th. They have a chance to jump up and get into the top 16 with a win on Friday over the Patriots.
Yeah, and those are always situations that make for great games, and we just talked about it with the Mount View Summers County, so we'll see if it's the hungrier team or the team that has been better throughout this season and wants to solidify their standing as the playoffs come into the mix. So we'll see how that one plays out. Should be a great game.
Absolutely. As for our additional area teams in Class AA, Liberty, I know, has had a tough season. They were a very young team coming in. They had a lot of senior veteran leadership that allowed them to get to the playoffs the past couple years. They ended the 2015 regular season very strongly, but 2016, it's fair to say, did not go the way they had hoped. Same for Westside, especially after the Renegades had started out so well, back-to-back wins on the road at Liberty and at home against Wyoming East. Then you have that string of losses put together, very tough to gain confidence back, but they were able to get it back a couple weeks ago with a win against Riverview, and they'll be hosting Oak Hill. Oak Hill, again, another team that is having a tough season. But then you take a look at other teams that, while they're not necessarily going to be in the playoffs, they've ended the season very strongly themselves. Shady Spring getting a win on their senior night against Liberty. The Tigers really coming into their own, in the middle part of the season. Wyoming East doing very well. They put together a nice win streak themselves, and Pikeview was a very pleasant surprise the past few weeks, especially with the play of Evan Rose. Yeah,
and all young teams that are going to get better, we assume, in the coming years. And that was one of the main struggles with all three of these teams at the beginning of the year, is that they were young, and a lot of times they're going to be outsized by many of their opponents. And so next season, especially a team like Pikeview, a lot of experienced freshmen and sophomores that have kind of gone through the meat grinder, and now they've come out the other side. They've gone through the adversity, and they need to focus on getting bigger and stronger in the off season. Now they come back a little bit bigger with that experience, and hopefully that propels them to a more successful season. But they've all, they haven't quit on their seasons, is what I'm trying to say. They've all kept going the entire way through, and so that when a team doesn't give up on themselves, that says a lot about their character. And then, when you work on the physical attributes in the off season, that's the time to work on that. You get bigger, get stronger, eat a lot more, and you can come back the next year with that experience. It makes you a lot better.
Yeah, Shady Spring and Pikeview have already finished their seasons. They have Week 11 off. Wyoming East is on the road at Liberty this Friday. Moving over to AAA now, our Northside Chevy game of the week. We have Greenbrier East at home fairly on their senior night. They will take on the second-ranked team in the state in Class AAA in Spring Valley. The Timberwolves only having one loss at Huntington, and they responded last week. They've responded with 7 straight wins, including a win last week on the road at current number 3 team in the state in Capital. So it's going to be a very tough test for the Timberwolves. But if the Spartans can put it all together, there is a chance for an upset, and most certainly if they do get the upset, that would erase any doubt they will be in the playoffs.
Yeah, man, I was getting razzed a lot by the Greenbrier East coaching staff. I was out there earlier this week, and they said, "You're Tom Beal. You're the guy who picked Princeton last week," and they were giving it to me, man, because they came out.
I picked Princeton too. I think,
I think we all picked Princeton,
Princeton.
And once they saw that I came out there, they were ready to jump all over me for that one, because they came out and. 40-7 over Princeton. Who would have thought? They came out and just the offense really exploded. Joey Powell, our athlete of the week this week, he was really the catalyst for that. He just got it done in a variety of ways for them. But talking to Coach Lee about this game, you could see his eyes just went huge when I asked him about what's Spring Valley like. What do they bring to the table? And he said they're a big team. They're big guys. He said they look like they could be junior college players. They're just a really big physical team, and he's not counting his team out or anything like that. He still believes that the charisma that they've developed over these last couple of weeks, they had kind of a tough stretch in the middle of the season, but they've kind of come together in these last few weeks, and he thinks it's a lot of just the focus has been a lot sharper. They get along better. They've really become a family, in the words of their players. I think Brad Falls is the one who said that specifically. They really feel like a family out there on the field. And so they believe in themselves, which is always an important factor. Whether or not they get it done, it remains to be seen. It sounds like it's just a really, really tough matchup, but they've got the heart, they've got the character, and they're playing some really good football right now. So it should be, if nothing else, a very competitive game.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've noticed with Greenbrier East the last couple of years. The Spartans do tend to be the epitome of a team that really rises up in the second half of a season. I remember last year they went 5-0. In the final 5 games of the season to get that playoff spot, although they would lose in the first round on the road at Martinsburg, another Eastern Panhandle team, which we could go on and on about the struggles against the Eastern Panhandle teams. But Princeton, meanwhile, the Tigers still control their own destiny. The loss to the Spartans, they entered that game 13th. They are now 16th, so right now they're still on the inside, but they have a tough test themselves. They are on the road at Point Pleasant, a AA team going for an undefeated regular season themselves, and Point Pleasant coming off a road win in our area. Actually, they were on the road at Westside. Our evening anchor, Rachel Ayers, who is a Point Pleasant alumna herself, she was at that game, and the Point Pleasant team, they are, I think, a legitimate state contender in Class AA.
Yeah, they're one of the best, so it's going to be a tough challenge for Princeton. But I think one of the things that they have going for them is they're a very motivated team in terms of not wanting to repeat the way last season ended for them. They had a real tough stretch at the end of the year, and they lost, games, including to Point Pleasant, by some pretty big margins. And, Wes Eddy he's done a really good job over there of keeping his guys focused on the task at hand. And I think that especially coming off this loss to Greenbrier East, they're going to be very motivated to turn things back around, and they don't want to get beat up again by Point Pleasant. They want to show that they're a legit team, and especially with playoffs potentially on the line here with a win or a loss, they're going to come out flying, and I expect a really competitive game in that one as well.
Yeah, and our third area team in Class AAA, Woodrow Wilson Flag Eagles, not been an easy season. Year 1 under Street Surrett, 1-8 for Woodrow Wilson. That said, in another world, they could very easily be 3-6 if they don't have defensive mental lapses against Riverside in the fourth quarter, against Greenbrier East in the fourth quarter. They could have very easily entered Week 4 at 3-0 because they did get the win in Week 3 at Bluefield.
Yeah, I think that's another team where they've just got to develop the experience. I think just a lot of younger guys who haven't seen a whole lot at this level, and they've played some very tough competition throughout the season. So I think that as they get a little more experience, get a little more familiar with Coach Surrett, they'll start to climb their way back up. It'll be a tough climb, but they need some time to get more adjusted.
Well, our final fifth quarter presented by Wendy's of Southern West Virginia will be on Friday night at 11 o'clock on Newswatch. right here on WOAY TV. Tom and I will be at this desk bringing you the final week of the high school football regular season. And moving on now to college, a lot to talk about. The first college football playoff rankings. They involve two of our area FBS teams. Virginia Tech is 19th after their 2 Thursday night wins at home against Miami and on the road at Pitt. Two teams that are very qualified themselves. It was not, they weren't the doormats of the ACC that the Hokies were playing. They were quality wins against quality competition. Both the Hurricanes and Panthers are also having good seasons.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech, they've done a tremendous job with Justin Fuente at the helm this year. They, started off a little ups and downs. A little, the Tennessee game was a tough one for them, but they bounced right back, and they've looked like a really solid team, top to bottom. I don't think they don't blow anyone away as far as their talent that they have, but they're just a really solid team between Gerard Evans and some of the guys in the running game, and their defense is pretty strong as well. So I think they'll continue to have a pretty good year.
Yeah, the Hokies are at Duke this weekend. They still maintain the inside track on the ACC Coastal Division. If they win out, they will be headed to Orlando for the ACC Championship game, where we presume they will play Clemson, although you never know. If Florida State or Louisville could capitalize if Clemson loses a couple games. Not that we've seen anything to indicate that's going to happen, but
especially not last week.
It would definitely be fair to say that right now it probably could be Clemson, Virginia Tech. Meanwhile, West Virginia ranked 20th in the college football playoff rankings. They are ranked 14th and 15th in the two human poll, or well, I shouldn't say human because they're all human polls at this point. No computers involved, thank goodness. But they are 14th and 15th in the AP and coaches polls following that loss to Oklahoma State. And I guess it's been a couple of days since that loss to the Cowboys. There was a lot of talk about, could this be where the Mountaineers finally collapse after the close call against Kansas State, after the dominant performances against TCU and Texas Tech, games that were certainly expected to be a lot closer than the final score ended up being.
Yeah, well, I think they lose one game and everyone's talking about a collapse all of a sudden. I think they'll be fine. It's just a real unfortunate time for them to lose a game. With Baylor losing as well, they would have been the only undefeated team remaining in the Big 12, which would have said a whole lot about their resume as far as it's probably still an outside shot, but those college playoff rankings, they love to see undefeated teams and kind of conference leaders. So tough break for WVU, but they're playing Kansas this week, so certainly a bounce back opportunity for them to get a win and kind of reestablish the confidence that they've had in the early part of the season. So I think they'll be all right. There's games coming up with Baylor, Oklahoma. They're going to be tough ones, but if they can build a little bit of confidence and continue to play good defense, they have a pretty decent shot. They got to fix some things defensively after giving up 37 points.
Absolutely. For the most part, the Mountaineers do still control their own destiny. If they win out, and they would need Oklahoma State to lose at least one more game, but they would still be in control of their own destiny for a Big 12 title. They, like Tom said, they're home against Kansas. Jayhawk football has never really been a strong tradition, with the one exception in 2007.
If they lose this
Mark
game,
Mangino.
you talk about a collapse. That's a real collapse.
Kansas, they lost. Their only win this season has been against FCS Rhode Island. They followed that the following week with the loss to my alma mater, Ohio. Granted, the Bobcats are having a great season themselves. They're in position for a division title themselves, but it's always good to see your alma mater go on the road to a Power 5 team and win. But these could be potential trap games for the Mountaineers. I must caution the Mountaineer fans, maybe not Kansas, but the following week on the road at Texas, a Texas team that will be playing with a bunch of confidence after the upset of Baylor. They're playing essentially to save Charlie Strong's job, but I expect that game in Austin to be a very good one, and then only then can they turn their attention to Oklahoma on November 19th.
Yeah, and I think that Texas game is a must-win for those reasons. You can't take that team lightly, and especially coming off of the Kansas win, I think that maybe this loss against Oklahoma State will keep them a little more grounded after beating a Kansas team than maybe they otherwise would have been. But if they lose to Texas and then they got to go face this juggernaut run here of Oklahoma and Baylor, that's that's a real tough thing to overcome here. So they need to beat Texas. That is a huge game for them.
Absolutely. And another area team that definitely needs a win this week, Marshall. They are on the road this week at Old Dominion. I was looking at their routes. They actually They actually need to win out just to get to bowl eligibility. There's still a chance that they can get to 6-6, claim bowl eligibility for a 4th straight season, but they need to go on the road and beat a Monarchs team that is clearly much improved from last year. I remember last year I was at the game in Huntington. The Monarchs just looked very young, very inexperienced. The Thundering Herd defense came within 3 minutes of a shutout, Old Dominion getting a touchdown late in garbage time. But that's not the same team that Marshall will be facing this year, and it's not the same team Marshall will be putting on the field themselves this year. It's been quite the shock to see Marshall struggle the way they have.
Yeah, at this point with Marshall, it's pretty much, I'll give them credit when they prove it to me type of deal. They just haven't, ever since that Akron game, man, they kind of just, the wheels fell off, and they have not looked like a credible team whatsoever. So I'm not saying that they're completely finished, and sure, there's an outside chance they could become bowl eligible, but I just don't see it from this team. And until they show up and they have a real convincing win, I can't say that they're going to make a bowl.
Yeah, and the more frustrating thing about that for the Thundering Herd is the losses. They have not really played. Southern Miss really was the first team they've played that is of actual real competition in that conference. They still have to play Middle Tennessee. They still have to play Western Kentucky, 2 teams that have really been thorns in the side the past few years for the Thundering Herd. For Marshall, both games are in Huntington this year. That's going to be some slight advantage, but when you take a look at the talent disparity, how much of an advantage?
Home field only does so much for you. When a good team comes in, and no better example of that than when Louisville came in here. It's just the home field doesn't make much of a difference when it comes to that point. So it's just been a tough year for them, and at this point, I think they need to set their sights on next season if you're a Marshall fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And another team that is also having not the easiest of seasons is the Concord Mountain Lions. It's been very interesting to see. The 2 years ago, before I arrived, 2014, they go 13-1 and make the Division II national semifinals before losing in the semifinals. The following year, 2015, they go 5-5. All their games, though, that they lost were decided because of late scores in the final minute, and it was one of those that really you hate to say it's the excuse for multiple games, but the fact of the matter was they knew they were the target game for everybody else in the Mountain East Conference. Some teams were able to get the job done against them more often than not. That seemed to be the case because all of their wins seemed to be blowout wins. This year, it's just been a complete surprise at how much things have not gone well for them.
Yeah, you can kind of gauge how the season's going by the length of Paul Price's beard at this point. It's I think it's been a tough year for him, and I give him credit because his first year at the helm, he's really trying to get this team back on top. He's been here as a coordinator when they were such a successful team, so he knows what a winning program at Concord looks like. But it's just been a tough run for him here as the head coach, and we've touched on it before. Penalties have been a big issue for them. They've had some injuries to their front seven at times, which has hurt them in a few games, and just the lack of a consistent running game or just really offense in general has been one of their biggest problems all season. The team gets up on them by a score or two, and it just makes it difficult for them to really come back and make it a game. So it's been a tough year for Concord, and hopefully they'll bounce back next season.
Yeah, and this weekend the Mountain Lions are on the road at West Virginia State, a team they have not lost to since 2008. I spoke with Paul Price on Wednesday. He said that fact does stick in the back of your mind when you're about to play a team that you haven't lost to in a while, or this current squad, they've never lost to West Virginia State, and the Yellow Jackets have struggled themselves. They only have 1 win on the season overall and a Mountain East place, so it could be a good chance, especially because they do have one more game following the Yellow Jacket contest. They will be on the road at UNC Pembroke, a team that right now, last I saw, was ranked in the top 25 in NCAA Division II. So this could be a great way to provide some confidence for the team going into that season finale at UNC Pembroke.
Yeah, it'd be real nice. If they can get a win against UNC Pembroke, that can be kind of the feather in their hat for the season.
It'd be a big feather in the cap if
so,
they can
so
close
just
on
it'd
2
be,
straight wins.
you know, the season didn't go the way they wanted to, but if they can get that type of win, that'd be awesome. But yeah, definitely do not want to lose this game to West Virginia State, and then it's, you know, then it just becomes a devastating season.
Yeah, and our final area team, Bluefield College, their senior night is this Saturday at 6 o'clock at Mitchell Stadium. They will take on Union. Last time the Rams were at Mitchell Stadium, they won. Only their second home win since reviving the football program in 2012. They beat Cincinnati Christian. You were at that game. Always great to see them do well. And like Concord, you know, Bluefield College, they're a team that they just make one too many mistakes game after game that otherwise they'd be in position to have more than just 1 or 2 wins a season.
Yeah, man, I like the Rams. You know, they fight hard. They really, especially in that Cincinnati Christian game, you couldn't tell that they were a winless team at that point, by the way. Just their energy heading into that game. They were hyped up. They were ready to go. They came out flying. And so they're a team that, you know, no matter what, they're going to go out and they're going to battle. They love to play football. They love to work hard. And so the season hasn't gone their way, but, you know, they're just out there having fun. And so hopefully they can end the season on a positive note and, you know, walk away with some positive memories from that year. But, you know, they keep fighting. And so a program like that where the mindset is always positive, you got to think that soon enough the things will turn around on the record.
Yeah, they are, again, home to Union this Saturday. They close the regular season on the road at Kentucky Christian. Look, you got the 2 stats for the Union squad and the Kentucky Christian squad. It is not out of the realm of possibility that this team could close with 2 straight wins and really give themselves a lot of good momentum going into 2017. And final thoughts. Again, we opened the show with the Cubs winning the World Series. We have to, I think, close the show with the end of the 108-year curse. It's finally over. I mean, it's one of those, I was reading Twitter and I was seeing so many posts saying you couldn't really tell what the price of gas was back then. Those were things that weren't monitored back then. We had no idea what the #1 song was because there wasn't radio. There wasn't television. We have made so much progress technologically as a country since 1908.
That was pre-World War I.
Yeah.
World War I was still like 6 years away when they won that World Series. So it's kind of unfathomable to think about someone not winning a championship for all that time, especially when there's been so many, you know, there's been expansion teams that have come in and they've won since then. And so, man, it's been a tough run for you, Chicago, but I'm happy you guys.
The south side, I think.
Well, they had their own drought too because the White Sox went from
1917
until 2005. So the Red Sox were 86. So I think they were another year on each end. So they were like 88 years in between there. So Chicago went droughtless for a while with some championships. Not for the Bulls in the 90s, man.
Not the Bulls, not the Blackhawks.
They would have had a tough stretch. But
and the Bears. Now that's the Bears.
I mean, you Cubs fans, I know you're all on cloud 9 right now. Enjoy it. I'm happy for you guys. I'm glad to see that you got the win. And Red Sox coming for you next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Full disclosure, I am from Columbus. We do have a professional baseball team, the Clippers, that currently is the AAA affiliate for the Indians. So I must admit it would have been cool to see a bunch of one-time Clippers get the World Championship trophy, especially on the Progressive Field turf. But if it had to be one team, it was the Cubs. So I'm happy. And it went 7 games and, you know, maybe not the best quality baseball. Maybe I think it was a lot of
exciting though,
running out of gas at the end, but definitely exciting. I
think we like to say.
That's not
make baseball fun again.
That's not up for debate. It was definitely an exciting World Series, that all of us will remember for a very long time, and I think we'll remember the time 12:48 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, November 3rd, 2016. That's when I looked straight at my cell phone right as Bryant threw the out to Rizzo. I wanted to document it, 12:48 a.m. Eastern Time on November 3rd, 2016. So for Chicago, technically, that's November 2nd because they're still an hour behind us. It would still have been late Wednesday night for them. But I think wherever you are, it's a moment that you'll never forget. And
sure.
We'll look forward to seeing how the Cubs now act as, you know, no longer the lovable losers. Now they're the target, the team everybody aspires to be.
We'll see how that shift goes, man, because a lot of the fans' identity was wrapped up in being we don't care what happens. We just like to go out to the ballpark and enjoy a nice game. Well, now you guys are winners, so now you have to care. You got to get into it. You got to be, they've always been passionate, but, now you got to be kind of that gritty, we got to win every game, Develop some of that Patriots mentality, guys. We'll see. We'll see you in the World Series next year, though.
Absolutely. Well, that will wrap it up for this edition of the Change-Up. We are on Facebook and Twitter at SportsWOAY. You can follow us on our individual pages as well. I'm at Digby Matt. He's at Tom Beal WOAY. Special thanks to Showtime Music for providing this great microphone. Something that probably looks like it would have been around in 1908, the style. I think that's fair to say.
Although, I don't know, man. That's shiny. I don't know if they could make it as shiny back in 1908.
That's true. And
it's a real nice microphone.
Yeah, the great music provided by your buddy definitely was not around in 1908, though.
No, John Canada, man, that's way before their time. They didn't have hip-hop until the 70s. So. But he's doing some great things. Check him out. Gritty City Records, John Canada on SoundCloud. For sure, check him out.
All right. We will be taking next week off because of the election. Tom and I will be providing updates as this historic election comes to an end after after many, many months of long, hard campaigning. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. To not talk about the election, we'll be talking about local sports. We can guarantee that.
No election talk ever here. We can promise you that.
Absolutely. But that will wrap it up for this edition of The Change-Up. Thanks for watching. This is WOAY Sports.